and welcome back to the Misty Morrison Podcast. I'm your host, Misty Morrison, and this is episode 43 of Petty Please. Here on the Misty Morrison Podcast, we love to judge, we love to give advice. On Petty Please specifically, we love to read the internet drama, other people's stories, and be grateful that it's not us. Before we get into our stories for the day, our usual housekeeping, whether you are new or returning. Long-form content is posted on YouTube and podcast every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. Short form is posted 3 times a day across socials, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Please remember to engage with the content to help the channel grow. Like, comment your thoughts on the stories, subscribe for more, share it with a friend if you liked it, all the things. All right, into our pettiness for today. Story number 1 is coming to us from r/petty revenge. Accidentally launched snack chaos. Tonight was one of those evenings. My sister was in the laundry area, busy folding and sorting clothes, and I was just sitting around trying to relax a bit. But my loving nephew decided that was the perfect time to make me his entertainment. I have never liked kids, so bear with me. He was at the mini table with his snacks on a stainless steel plate with biscuits, I guess. And he kept throwing his stuffed toy at me. I ignored it at first, saying blah, 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 he is a kid and I should longer my patience, but he did it again. Then again, and again. I got pissed. He didn't stop, so eventually I picked it up and threw it back toward him. Not even hard, just enough to return it. But it didn't hit him. It hit the stainless plate. Of course it did. The sound was loud, like that sharp metal clang that instantly makes your heart drop. You know what I mean? He went quiet, and before my sister could come over, I panicked a little and ran straight to the kitchen. I turned on the faucet and started rinsing whatever was in the sink, acting like I had been there the whole time. After a few seconds later, my sister rushed in from the laundry area because obviously she heard the noise. She saw her kids standing there where the snack was scattered on the floor, and me at the sink minding my own business. My nephew looked at me like he was about to cry and called me a traitor. My sister didn't even ask me anything, and she just went straight to my nephew. She scolded him and tapped his hand with a hanger and said something like, "That was enough for tonight." So he got sent to bed early with no cartoons. Meanwhile, I stayed at the sink until things calmed down, and I'm trying my best not to laugh. I didn't mean for it to turn out that way, but I finally got some peace. And I honestly don't know if it's petty enough, but it's mildly petty for me. That's horrible. He got in trouble. I mean, yes, he was, how old was he? Does it say? It didn't say how old he was. But, I mean, I get you got annoyed. He wanted to play with you. You didn't want to play. But it was your fault. That's not right. Ugh. Okay, I scrolled down and saw the comments. The first comment asked, "How old is your nephew?" And OP replied and said, "He just turned 10 last week." So the person that asked how old he was said, "Yeah, he shouldn't be throwing toys at you. He deserved it." Yeah. And the next one says, 10 years old? The way he was acting made me think he was 2 or 3. That's what I had in my head. I had in my head a kid, because like at the mini table, and he had a toy he was throwing. I was imagining like no more than 4 or 5 years old. That would have made sense. 10 years old, why is he throwing a toy at you? Okay, he deserved it. He deserved it. I have changed my judgment. Oh, okay. Off to an interesting start here. Story number 2 is coming to us from r/petty revenge. New management didn't want to pay. I said goodbye. Don't ever let someone else dictate your value. Respect the work of others as equal to your own. If you have value, they have value. A long-standing client of mine went through personnel and management changes over the past year. Attitudes shifted. One of the new hires was dismissive and rude to me in a Zoom meeting. Edit for something that was their fault. I noticed I was not being consulted as often, which is fine. That's how life goes. New management contacted me for help. I quoted them 1 hour of my time. They fought back, questioning how I kept my time and where my time was going. They refused to pay. So I ghosted them. Over the next couple of months, I received 1 to 2 follow-up emails per week and at least 5 calls, all to voicemail. Eventually, they relented and asked for the invoice. Nope. They stalked me on social media. I blocked them. I sent them another invoice for a different fee, a long-established annual recurring cost. I told them non-payment will result in revoking a license. They refused to pay the recurring fee but pleaded with me again on the other matter. I gave no response, and today I revoked their license. And they're still stuck with the original problem. Moral of the story? If you want someone's work, pay them. They spent hours wasting time and quibbling over nothing when they could have simply paid a small fee to get the job done. I hope you and your colleagues are reading this, Amanda and F you. Wow. I do hope Amanda read that. Yes. Oh, story number 3 is coming to us from r/petty revenge. Roommate's dirty shower hair. The revenge needs a little context. I, 23 female, have been living in my current apartment for a little over a year. We are 5 people, but since we have multiple bathrooms, I only share my bathroom with one of my roommates, 24 male. He is just overall not the cleanest person, and the rest of us are pretty annoyed by his lack of hygiene and cleanliness. Like he never cleans, and if he cleans, it isn't actually really clean. He leaves his dirty dishes all over the apartment and stinks up our whole entryway because all he does is eat frozen pizza, sleep, smoke, and drink alcohol. One of the things he does is leave his hair in the shower after showering. He has long curly hair. I have talked to him about this many times, and every time I see him after he's taken a shower, I remind him to please remove the hair. In my opinion, he's a little too old to have to be reminded of stuff like this. But what pisses me off the most is that his reasoning for not just removing the hair once he's done showering is, I think having to touch wet hair is disgusting. I just don't like doing it. I mean, fair point, but does he think it's any less disgusting for me to have to do it instead? Recently, I've gotten so fed up, I started doing something that is honestly kind of disgusting. Whenever I have to shower and there is still hair in the shower, I just take a piece of toilet paper, pick the hair up, and put it on his hairbrush. Good place for it. I only do this if his last shower was like 24 hours ago or even longer. If he only recently showered, I take the hair and throw it in the trash. I know this is foul, but I'm just fed up with his bullshit. Also, sorry for possible errors or confusions. English isn't my first language. Okay, for English not being your first language, that was pretty well written. I wouldn't be throwing any of it in the trash. If it is bothering you that much and you want it out of the shower, I think picking it up and putting it on his hairbrush is the exact perfect thing to do. It is his hair for him to deal with, and you still shouldn't have to, but at least you're removing it from the space where you don't want it and putting it back in his space where he has to deal with it. It might not still be wet and gross when he gets to the hairbrush. I don't know. And honestly, he may just be able to pick up the hairbrush by the handle and just flip it over in the trash and not even have to touch it, but at least you're not letting him forget. I can't really say anything. So I have curly hair. It's not long right now, but I have a spot in the shower where when I'm shampooing and conditioning, a bunch of hair comes out of my hands. I gather it up and I put it in with my shampoos and conditioners. And when I clean the shower, I will take all the hair out because it's dry when I'm cleaning the shower and it doesn't feel nasty. So I'll take all the hair out, throw it away. But anything that doesn't get caught on my hands that goes to the drain, it's in the drain, right? I leave it in the drain. No. My husband feels compelled to scrape it off the grate over the drain and sticks it on the shower wall. Sometimes my son will shower in there and he gets freaked out if the hair touches him in the shower. So they stick my hair out of the drain on the shower wall, and they're they'll wait a couple days and ask me, how come you didn't get your rat out of the shower? It starts to build up. I didn't take it out of the drain. Leave it there. It'll go down eventually. I am not just leaving my hair in random places. I have a designated spot. They pulled it out of the tray. Not my fault. Oh, okay. Story number 4 is coming to us from r/petty revenge, Hawaiian resort. I worked at a company for almost 15 years in the 90s and early 2000s. Toward the end of my time there, we hired a supervisor. I didn't report to him, but he would read documents on my desk when I wasn't there, and he would sometimes make copies of my product and give it to his subordinates, telling them to modify it to fit what they were working on. To be honest, I didn't care since we all worked for the same company, but it was the sneakiness and doing it behind my back that irritated me. He was also an obnoxious person, blowing his own horn and basking in the success of his guys way too much. He was not well liked. A coworker, Bert, and I had been attending a conference in Hawaii every year. We were good friends and hung out together with others from the conference that we met once a year. It was a reward for doing our jobs. The conference was at a resort hotel in Waikiki Beach, but the rooms were limited and would be sold out by the time the conference began. If you didn't make your reservations in advance, you'd have to stay somewhere else. Tom, the supervisor, saw the travel authorization form on my desk that I had to submit for the conference, and then filled one out for himself to go. He was told that there was only funding to send 2 people, so he went up the management chain to get approval for himself. Because he outranked me and my coworker, one of us had to withdraw our paperwork to go. We literally flipped a coin, and I won. I traveled frequently and had accumulated lots of frequent flyer miles. Because the flight time was over a certain number of hours from East Coast to Honolulu, we were authorized to travel in business class, a huge benefit. I did not want to sit next to Tom, so I used miles to upgrade from business class to first class. I did not tell Tom about my upgrade. Our travel agent was able to get reservations for both of us at the resort hotel. Tom, being Tom, let everyone in the office know that he was going to Hawaii, bragging about flying in business class and staying at a Hawaiian resort. He also told me that I was expected to introduce him to the conference regulars, take him to the best restaurants, and show him a good time. It got to be too much, and I intended to avoid him as much as possible while we were there. I don't blame you. We were flying out on Sunday and flying back on an overnight flight the next Saturday. Saturday afternoon, I called to confirm my airline reservation, something I had learned to do over my years of frequent travel. Asking about seats, I was told that there were no business class or first class seats available, but coach still had some. That got me thinking. I called from a payphone later that day and changed Tom's reservation to a business class flight on Monday. I then called the hotel and canceled his room. I checked in at the airport Sunday morning and then went to the first class lounge to wait for my flight to be called. When the announcement came over the loudspeakers, I grabbed my stuff and went to the gate. They were boarding the first class passengers as I arrived there, so I got on the plane, found my seat, and ordered a drink. When most of the plane was boarded, Tom came through the jetway looking furious. Seeing me, he stopped and started ranting about the airline effing up his reservation. The flight attendant quickly told him that he needed to be seated. He asked if there were any empty seats other than coach, and she apologized, but the premier cabins were full. Twice during the flight, he came up to my seat to complain some more. The agent at the counter was able to change his ticket to this flight, but could only get him a seat in coach. He was assigned the middle seat in a center row of 5 seats, and couldn't get comfortable. He ranted on, even asking if I would switch with him for the last half of the flight. I politely declined, and didn't see him again until we were at the luggage carousel to get our bags. We took the courtesy shuttle to the hotel and waited in line to check in. He was at the check-in next to me when he learned that he had no reservation at the sold-out Hawaiian resort. He went ballistic. A manager was summoned and took him to another computer station about 20 feet away. I didn't stick around and went up to my room. My phone rang about 15 minutes later, and it was Tom, pitching a fit. He told me that he needed to share my room with me, since it was where the conference was. He complained that the manager was only able to secure a room for him at a motel about a 10-minute walk away. Although I had 2 queen-sized beds, I told him my room only had 1 bed. I didn't mention the balcony with the ocean view or the separate living room area. I saw Tom during all the sessions. I took pity on him, and he hung out with me at the cocktail social after the first day of sessions, and tagged along with me and my companions for dinner. We flew back Saturday evening, and since he was in business class, he didn't come up to complain. I did confess to Bert at lunch a few days after returning, and he said it kind of made up for not being able to travel with me. This was good. This was good. You you messed him up like at every single term. Messed up the flight. Messed up the room reservations. But you put him where he belonged. You put him in his place. Hopefully probably not because he's him. But I would hope that someone would learn from this and maybe not be so full of themselves in the future. That would be nice. I'm sure that's not what happened, but you did your part and you did it well. Nicely done. Story number 5 is coming to us from r/petty revenge. Petty revenge with a little bit of pro revenge? I like to think so. Edit, for those saying I have a bad therapist, no, I do not. She is amazing, and this was one small part of the treatment process and not the entirety of it. Is she perfect? No. But it was fun. But was it fun and a little petty? You bet. All she really did was give me the permission I didn't necessarily need to do this. Hello there, beautiful Redditors. I, 36 female, have a story of petty revenge that might include a bit of pro-revenge mixed in. So I grew up in a super abusive and neglectful home that has sent me to literal years of therapy. Lots of CPTSD treatment, anxiety meds, attempted to reconcile with my parents, and was told by them that they meant to be abusive and they wouldn't change their ways, so I went no contact with them. Fair? My father in particular is a narcissist that controls the lives of everyone around him, to the point where when I married my husband, my father sat me down while my husband was at work one day and demanded that I get my husband in line and stop letting him be so disrespectful. It was around this point that I started realizing what a large problem we had with my parents because my mother follows my father's every whim. We spent years trying to set boundaries with them, and after the literal years, my father pounded on the table and said, I am who I am and you're not going to change me. And this shortly after telling me that he meant it when he told me as a child that if you or anyone else ever called CPS on me, I will lie to them and make it look like you are perfectly well taken care of, but after the social worker leaves, you won't be okay, and there will be some child abuse. Damn. And that he wasn't remorseful for saying that. And honestly, this story is like 1% of the abuse I suffered at his hands and my mother's hands as well. And in just about every single way you can imagine. Physical, emotional, mental, other ways, yes, you know what I mean. But I'm not trying to trigger anyone. So, where does the revenge part come in? Here we go. I started with a new therapist, specifically a trauma therapist, and she encouraged me to embrace the angry part of healing as part of the grief cycle. And because I have never been allowed to be angry before because that was dangerous with my father. So we started talking in one particular session about little things I could do to inconvenience my parents in some way, like giving their numbers to telemarketers or something simple like that. Nothing huge or super destructive or life-altering, just a little something to safely express my anger towards them for the lifetime of pain and suffering they had caused me. One of the things we talked about was signing them up for things like Sample Depends or something like that. So I went home and did some research and discovered an entire website dedicated to different websites and organizations that you could get free stickers from. So of course, I signed my father up for several of them, like 20 or 30 of them. And the best part of it is that I signed him up for them under a typo of his name. Think John Smythe for John Smith. So like John without the J and Smith with a Y and an E instead of SMITH, which I knew would bother him because he hated it when people would misspell or mispronounce his name because, of course, he's a narcissist. So I signed him up for them and don't hear anything from them because at this point, we're no contact. But I still think about it at times and giggle to myself or with my husband and friends. At this point, it's pretty much petty revenge, I'm thinking, but a little less than a year later, presumably when their year-long lease was up, we got word that they'd moved. Same area, but yep, they moved. And at first, I just thought, okay, so they moved, and didn't think much more of it. But then one day I remembered all of the stickers and thought about the fact that they had lived in an apartment with a very small community stack of mailboxes. And so I like to think in my head that the stickers and continuing missives from those 20 to 30 different companies probably had something to do with it. Especially since my parents are traditionally hoarders and had not one but two different garages in their apartment complex full of their crap. And we spent 14 years at our previous house and only left there because my father was robbed at gunpoint one night. So it would have been a massive undertaking to get them to move. So I do like to imagine that I'm partly responsible for maybe spooking them a little bit out of their fancy apartment. Is this petty revenge or pro revenge? You tell me. Have a lovely day, Redditors. Because it was stickers, is a lot of stickers, but because it was stickers, I would say that was petty revenge. You didn't hurt them, you didn't cause harm, but they also don't know it's you. And I feel like it would need to be more harmful or to eventually come out who tortured them for it to go into pro. I could be wrong, but definitely good petty revenge. Honestly, I wish you had done more. And honestly, I hope you find their new address so you can do it again. If they didn't have their mail forwarded, and they probably didn't, I hope you find their new address so you can do it again with stickers and samples and so much more. So much more. Let's see. And the first comment says, if you're able to get the new address, start the process again. They can run, but they can't hide. Exactly. Keep it going. It's only taking a little bit of your time, maybe a little bit of inconvenience for you to go through and set it all up. But once you get them signed up for everything, your job's done. You just get to sit back and enjoy. And apparently, people will still keep you apprised of where they're at or what they're doing, so you'll get to hear about it later. Good for you. That is the least that they deserved. All right, that is, was it 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, that is 5 stories for this week's episode of Pity Please. Thank you so much for being here for another episode of the Misty Morrison Podcast. Remember, kindness changes everything. I'll see you next time. Bye.